Okay, very good. Good morning, everybody. I'm so honored to be here with you all. I see some familiar faces in the audience and some new faces to the social services arena. My name is Cassandra Gandara. I'm a licensed social worker, as you just heard, for over 30 years here in our community and currently Mayor Pro Tem for the city of Las Cruces. When I was asked to do this presentation for the conference, I thought a lot about my work in the last 30 years and what words of wisdom and tools I could share with you that would be helpful. I kept coming back to 4 words: get back to basics. With that, let us begin. The title of my presentation is Reflection, Past, Present, Future, Coming Out of the Chaos. When I sent this over to Roseanne Vasquez, she said, "Oh, yes, because of COVID." And I replied, it's a metaphor for life and all its ups and downs. And yes, it could be about COVID and how it has impacted each one of us. So, essentially, I'm hoping that as participants, you will learn how to use the cultural backpack, person and environment, and adaptive leadership approaches when identifying problems from a personal and/or work setting that will lead to positive and lasting change. To also identify the differences between technical and adaptive issues and how to put into action adaptive principles to enable individuals in our community systems to thrive. So let us begin. To add a little more context to my introductions, these are my parents, Joel and Dolores Ponzio. The first picture was taken in 1967 at a homecoming dance shortly before my parents married, and I was born probably 9 months later. The second is a few years back. I love my parents. They're my first teachers, really. I was born and raised, as they mentioned, in a small mining town named Bear, New Mexico. I'm the eldest daughter of 3. My parents instilled the importance of education, a strong work ethic, and the importance of God being front and center in our lives. We attended Mass on Sundays, and as a Catholic, I completed most of my sacraments. My father was a diesel mechanic and a union steward. He stood in many picket lines, fighting for equal pay and safe working conditions. My mom, a homemaker, welcomed us home from school with a hot meal, always. She engaged us with questions like, how was school? What did you learn? My mom also instilled a drive for service and encouraged my siblings and I to be involved in many extracurricular activities that included academic and sports teams. As the eldest of 3, I assumed the role of protector and mediator. The collage on the screen are things that are of great importance to me, like the importance of family. Here you see my immediate and extended family at my brother's wedding. We are acting very silly, but I must say it took quite a bit of encouraging to get my parents to that wedding, to see the importance of their support of my gay brother, and frankly, the realization that if they did not attend, there would forever be a wedge between my parents and my brother. As the older sister, I just wasn't going to let that happen. These items are for the cultural backpack exercise I do when I do presentations and events I am asked to participate in. It is my way of introducing myself, being vulnerable, and showing a human side to me. The cultural backpack is a metaphor for life. We carry this imaginary backpack of experiences, don't we? Good and bad. It signifies who I am, what culture, values, norms, events have molded me into the person I am today. So I would like for you to take 5 minutes and introduce yourself to each other at your table. what I would like for you to do is share experiences and think about, would those experiences that you share be different with a stranger or someone you know? And why not? So, you guys ready? It's going to be super interactive, okay? So I know you may already know each other. It sounds like, it looks like many of you in agencies are sitting at the table, and that's okay. But this exercise hopefully is going to help us build bridges and relationships and engage with our clients moving forward. So indulge me a little bit. I'll give you 5 minutes, okay? Repeat the question? Yeah. So I want you to introduce yourself using sort of the backpack metaphor, right? Talking about experiences, culture, norms that have molded and shaped you. The question that I want you to ponder is, would this introduction be different if you're introducing yourself to people you know versus a stranger and or a client? Okay? So 5 minutes, begin now. Okay, let's reconvene. Anybody interested in sharing your experience with the entire group? Roseanne has a mic. Anybody? It'd be helpful. Don't be shy. Anybody? Yeah, way in the back. Thank you. Way in the back. And can you hear me, by the way? Yes? Okay.
Sorry.
No.
We just talked a little bit about, because we all work in mental health, that we're very open and try to be, because part of our job is to reduce stigma around mental health and substance use disorders. But that we might, that it's more of a fine tuning of, who we're talking to. Mr. Smead here brought up the example of like church, that we might introduce ourselves differently in a religious setting, let's say, than maybe in a setting like this, where we can be, really, really open about our recovery or our, past substance use or whatever is affecting us. And then Renee talked about professional settings. So it's a fine tuning about wherever we're at, but I think we pretty much all agreed that we're pretty open and are really trying to reduce that stigma and connect to people and identify with them.
Thank you so much, Athena. Appreciate that. I recognize your voice back there, even though you're sort of blurry I'm not wearing my glasses. But anybody else? Anybody else like to share? Up front. They're making you work, Roseanne. Getting your steps for sure.
My exercise for today.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to say we kind of talked a little bit about different family backgrounds that we came from, whether it was, divorce or, all different hard circumstances we had, and kind of good and bad, and how that colors and changes how we view all of our relationships that we're looking at, and how we think about how families should function or don't, and how we're just colored by that a little bit. And that always is very interesting to me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think I'm hearing Athena loud and clear about boundaries, right? Thinking about what we share with folks that maybe might be our clients and patients. And honestly, I've come from old school, right? I was taught literally that you kept your personal and your professional very separate, very separate. And I struggled with that as I was evolving as a social worker, right? Because I'll tell you what, the research is compelling that engaging in relationship building in addition to using evidence-based practice really works towards your clients, patients being successful. So I'm asking you to think about, what we do as we engage with our clients, the sort of self-disclosure that we might use moving forward in that dyad. Okay. Let's see. So let me ask a question. Does it matter the zip code we live in, or you live in, or your clients? Does it matter? No? Yes? Okay. Okay. Speaking of my neighbor over there, 88001. So I live in the 88001 zip code, right? To compare my area to 88012, let's say, do I see equity and inclusion? In fact, when I walk out my door, do I feel safe walking in on my sidewalks? Do I even have sidewalks? Street lights, streets without potholes, appropriate drinking water, broadband. Do we consider these things when we are working with our clients or patients? With a show of hands, do we consider these things? Good, very good. The next concept I would like to introduce you to is person and environment. Person and environment is a process that I learned in my social work studies decades ago, and one that I utilize most as a city councilor. Person and environment concept suggests that the environment strongly influences people and their behavior. It shapes their beliefs, what and how they will respond to events. So as a practitioner, it is important to consider the whole person from a holistic viewpoint. When I think of an individual, I think of the person as an individual. I consider the bio, psycho, social, spiritual elements, family of origin, extended family, and how they exist in their home, work, and community. Other areas to consider are that of your micro, meso, and macro systems, and how individuals exist and interact in those systems. As an example, when I was first elected to my first term in office, I received an angry email from a constituent about a fire that occurred in an abandoned home in her neighborhood in the Mesquite Historic District. Historically, Mesquite Historic District was fraught with drugs and gangs, urban sprawl, and many marginalized residents. We have a very high poverty rate at the time. We have a very high poverty rate, and at the time that I was at CYFD, the zip code that had the most referrals and investigations. To get back to the story, I, of course, was concerned about the damage and unsafe conditions it may have caused in the area. I asked to meet with them at their home to share with me their concerns, to include organizing a neighborhood meeting. Skeptically, she agreed. The meeting was a very positive one. She, a Caucasian female in her late 50s, and her husband in the mid-60s, had bought the property years back and renovated it. She utilized their space as a mixed-use concept, that of living and working as an artist. She shared the concerns years back at having a series of arsons in that community, and how they arrested the individual and thought that that individual had been in prison and may be released. It was causing the neighbors a high level of anxiety and PTSD and reoccurring trauma. We agreed to organize a meeting in the evening. After 2 subsequent meetings with the neighbors, listening to their concerns, addressing what the next step should be, we discovered the importance of organizing their neighborhood again by reinstituting their neighborhood watch program, understanding the issues that surrounded their community, like drug use, property crime, and gentrification. One thing was for certain, and I thought was interesting, was the fire was caused by quote-unquote squatters. And so when I hear the word, I cringe, right? Because these are individual human beings, right? Down on their luck, maybe some of them. And I like to refer to them as our homeless people, right? That are struggling. Some of them may have mental health issues, dual diagnosed, right, with substance abuse. And so one of the things that we talked a lot about was addressing people with kindness and love and support, sort of trying to break that stigma, right? And I think so many of us, and I'm guilty of that, will automatically go from us versus them, like you over there, them, right, and us here on one side, right? And so we quickly understood that we needed to again work through this situation with love, respect, and compassion. So the group and I were able to convince council to give more authority to the city manager. To address nuisance issues, the city formed the neighborhood action team that keeps track of these abandoned residential and commercial buildings. And in fact, we didn't stop there. Because we have such a huge shortage of affordable housing, we got the support of council to, when these particular units came up for sale at auction, the city would buy them and turn them into affordable housing. Although the areas and issues continue to surface, there have been a building of community and an improved pathway of communication with community police officers, the Weed and Seed program, community partners, and constituents within the city. I can't tell you how many times people feel they cannot make a difference and are paralyzed to act. So when you say, what can one person do? It just takes a call and a desire to just start to make a difference. So the next concept I want to speak to is that of adaptive leadership. On your table, you have some worksheets. Please, have them close. I think there's enough for everybody. Does everybody have a worksheet that they could refer to? So we have some here in the front that are not being utilized. Yes, everybody? I'm thinking silence means yes? Okay. When I began my work at CYFD Protective Services and around the early 2000s, I was introduced to adaptive leadership. We were moving to transform the system as we knew it. The process was very difficult, but extremely worthwhile. We received the state-of-the-art training and consultation from the national organizations. One such training was that of adaptive leadership, conducted by Harvard Business Institute. So let us ponder, do you believe that anybody could be a leader? Anybody? Yes? In workplace, home, your clients? Yes? Okay, good. I'm glad, because that's what I believe in for sure. And in these systems, think of our supervisors and managers of our agencies. What type of leadership do they exude? Are they authoritative, democratic, laissez-faire, transactional, or transformational? Got it? You thinking about those managers and supervisors in your organization? Okay, very good. For the sake of the presentation, I will be discussing two leadership principles. Authoritative leadership encompasses a leader who makes all the decisions and no real input from the team members. Adaptive leadership is a practice of mobilizing people into action so that we can all thrive. So how do we do that? So on a piece of paper, and what I mean is your worksheets, think about a challenge from work. I'll give you a few minutes. Think about a challenge that you have at work. It could be individually, it could be in your team, it could be maybe the larger organization. Think of a challenge, a problem, and jot it down on that worksheet. So, to practice adaptively, we must select and diagnose an adaptive challenge. Think about this challenge by using a 2x2 matrix. You diagnose your organization and then you move into action, all the while diagnosing yourself in that system and evolving into action. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Clear as mud? To diagnose the organization and then move into action, all the while diagnosing yourself in that system and evolving into action. So it's like person and environment, right? Think about an ecosystem. And I'm going to refer to the picture in front of me. Look at that. So shout out to my former colleagues at CYFD when I retired. This is what they gave me, along with some other beautiful gifts, but as part of as their gift to me. This tree, right? A tree of life. It's like an ecosystem, right? That what happens, right? In the spring to the fall to the winter. What happens if it doesn't get rain or water, if you will? What if it doesn't get tended to appropriately, right? This ecosystem, right, has to adapt. It's sort of like the theory behind this particular practice is biological, right? You have to adapt. Think about your agencies. Some of us have been in agencies for 30 plus years, like me. And some of our agencies don't exist today. We wonder why that happens, right? Maybe they didn't evolve and change as things needed to change across a certain period of time. So, the theory behind the practice suggests several things. Adaptive leadership is specifically about change that enables the capacity to thrive. Successful adaptive change builds on the past rather than jetson it. Organizationally, adaptation occurs through experimentation, right? How many of us have this cool idea and think if my boss would just let me do this, I know I can make a difference? How many of us have those cool ideas? Yes? Yeah, cool. Now, how many of us have the courage to speak up and say, boss, I think I'd like to do this? Hands up. Yeah? Very cool. Good. Some of us don't. Some of us have great difficulty doing that, right? Because remember when we talked about the boss or the manager or your supervisor, right? You're thinking, I don't know, my boss is pretty authoritative, right? That's difficult to do, right? I don't know that I can do that, okay? Or in the whole line of there are so many people that have been there a long time, right? And they think they have all the experience and the knowledge, right? What is my little measly self with 3 months in going to be able to do in terms of change, being a change agent, right? So, adaptation relies on diversity. Learning is often painful and could generate loss. And finally, adaptation takes time, a lot of it. So what steps do we take to name the challenge? The theory and sort of the idea is not only is that everybody could be a leader, but when you select the challenge, it takes a lot of experimentation about ensuring that it's the right challenge, right? And the challenge can be two things: a technical challenge, right? and an adaptive challenge. I'm going to put that sort of in the parking lot and talk a little bit about the steps that it takes to name or call out a challenge. So think about your mission in your organization, agency, team. Got it? How many of us can recite that? Can you recite it right now? Your mission? Yeah? Good for you. If you can't recite it, maybe the mission's too long? Just a thought, right? So hands, a show of hands. How many can recite a mission? Your mission. Very cool. Okay. So you look at your mission, where does conflict emerge? Does it happen around values or goals and objectives? Not only do we pay attention to what people say, but how they say it, right? Those nonverbals, right? Like, they're not giving me eye contact. That must be a challenge. You know, talking about this must be a challenge. Or the rolling of the eyes. Or this one I love. What are other people saying? Like your allies or your opponents. You also pay attention to those things. Like we all have work avoidance, right? There are some of those tasks or those things that we don't want to do, we kind of avoid. You think about that in that term. And then those competing demands. Like how many of us would say, if I just had a little bit more time, right? Or if you're really good, you're talking to your manager, your supervisor, and saying, look, this is the thing that you asked me to do, but I have this other thing. So you tell me, help me decide which demand am I going to work on, right? This one is especially important, is what happens when you leave the room. You know, those team meetings that people are afraid to say what's the elephant in the room, but then they walk out the door and then they start talking about it. How many of us experience that? Show of hands. Yeah. So, that's probably your challenge. That's probably your challenge. So, look back at the problem you jotted down, and with the information I just shared with you, how does that problem look now? Is it not quite the problem you should probably be addressing? And if so, then as I think the worksheet, it talks about version 2. So rewrite that problem given just the characteristics of your challenge that I just listed earlier. Give you a few minutes. Okay, as we continue to diagnose the problem, here's another concept for you that is very adaptive. It's thinking politically. Thinking politically. It's not just for me, the city councilor, mayor pro tem, but it's also for each and every one of you, right? And what that means is looking at your organization, you must identify those stakeholders. And for each, you must identify what stake they have in the identified challenge, desired outcome, level of engagement, and degree of power and influence. Does that make sense? So in your worksheet, you have sort of, you've identified the challenge, right? And then you're looking at then listing those people, right? They might be internal partners, external partners. Think about the people, your stakeholders that are going to be helpful in this adaptive challenge. Jot those down. Are you thinking? Writing? Now, also need to think of values they possess and how and what commitments they have to behaviors and decision-making processes, what loyalties they do not only have in the internal organization, but outside of it. What do people fear the most if they risk working through the challenge? And finally, the hidden alliances in other departments, groups, etc. So I made mention about two types of challenges, adaptive and technical. A technical challenge is a challenge that can be solved quickly by applying established know-how processes. And often we look to our authority for it. So in the training that I received years ago, they gave an example of a form. If we just put this form together, it's going to make all the difference, right? And then they put the form together and it didn't make the difference. We're still having all these issues, right? That's a technical fix. I tell you what, if we could technically fix things, we'd be a much better community, right, for it. The adaptive challenges are the gaps between the values people stand for and the reality and the current reality. You are unable to recognize those values in their environment. In the example I gave about my constituent and her concerns and the neighbor's concerns, what was the adaptive challenge? Anybody? Or what was the challenge? The fire? Because the fire department went out and stopped, put out the fire, right? The need to develop a group or training? Yes? No? You thinking about that? Could they be technical fixes? Yes, they can. They can, for sure. Or is it how the neighbors feel? Promises made and forgotten. They were never kept. The historical trauma of being a poor, marginalized community and feeling forgotten. That's the adaptive challenge, right? So, as we look to our agencies and organizations, there's a handout labeled Survey, How Adaptive is Your Organization? Find it? I'd like for you to take a few minutes and fill that out. Take a few minutes and fill that survey out. Okay, when we look at the qualities of this organization, we see elements such as the ability to name the elephant in the room. How many of our organizations, and when we come together to solve a problem, that you're able to name that elephant in the room? Does everybody understand when I say that, what I mean? How many of our organizations are we able to do that? Yeah, I see some pensive hands, maybe. Yeah, I get it. You might be here with your boss and organization, so I totally understand that. That's the elephant in the room, right? Totally get it. I get it. So, also that folks have a shared responsibility for the organization's future. Independent judgment is expected. Leadership capacity is developed. Reflection and continuous learning is institutionalized. Those are the qualities of an adaptive organization. Where does your organization rate? Why not? What can you as an individual do to be a change agent in that organization? I've given you just a few very specific skills and tools to a month-long training to include, there's lots of books on it as well, lots of cool tools in here that I would encourage you individually. I got this one through Amazon, not too expensive, like, 20 bucks. I would encourage each and every one of you to look at, because I believe wholeheartedly that this is what we need to do in our community to change and to assist not only ourselves, but our children and families, right? So that they can flourish. I'm compelled today to talk a little bit about this. I didn't want to make it my entire presentation, but I'm very concerned and I need your help. We here in Doña Ana County, specifically in Las Cruces, have seen an uptick in crime. Every week almost, we have a shooting that involves teenagers. And then when you do some postmortem, these are teenagers with lack of supervision, drop out of school, get involved in drugs, the selling of drugs, firearms. And I think that when I look back, so many of us have touched their lives in one form or fashion. Folks, we're losing our children and our families at great speed. As I said before, I believe in my heart of hearts, working adaptively on these issues is key to our change, to success. So as part of answering an adaptive challenge in terms of looking at an uptick in crime, but more specifically trauma, I am the founder and creation of the new program, Resilience Leaders. So many of you here in this room participate in this group. It's a group that works towards bringing awareness about adverse childhood experiences and what happens when adverse childhood experiences and trauma goes undetected and untreated. What are ACEs? Is everybody familiar with the ACEs? Adverse childhood experiences, hands up if you are. Yay, very good, very good. So essentially, this group, we've developed 10 sectors that serve with 10 leaders, the survival and thriving services. We've done a tremendous amount of work using tools in terms of continuous quality improvement, the adaptive leadership principles. We've done surveying of our county. on each one of these sectors, and to include strategic planning. So each one of these teams has a strategic plan of action. And I'm naming a few of those, and one is affordable housing. Shout out to Monique Lopez. And I'm struggling because I always say her unmarried name. So sorry, Monique, you're around here somewhere, so sorry. Hey, Monique, there's Monique. She is our sector leader along with Melissa Ontiveros. Boy, they're the impactful duo. These ladies have done a tremendous amount of work with so many of our housing partners here. But here's some incredible impactful data in terms of what people are reporting in relation to housing. And frankly, this has been before COVID. So I'm a bit concerned now that COVID has taken place, because I've had, and actually our last month's meeting specifically was addressing housing issues. Sylvia at Community in the Schools was mentioning that so many of her Lynn families are in hotels now because their landlords are actually making decisions to sell their homes, so leaving our folks homeless and living in hotels. Now, I don't know about you folks, but is that the most appropriate place for our children and families? No, not necessarily, right? And so here's some data. 33% single parent households are in need of housing services. 27% of them have an annual income below $25K. 33% of them have an associate's degree or below. So what does that mean to each and every one of us, right? Well, this housing sector has been working tirelessly to address these issues and then some. And some cool things that are happening is bringing people together that sometimes don't come together, right? And they speak courageously about issues and concerns related to their system. And so now they're talking about a universal tool. Like, wouldn't it be cool if a client that was experiencing homelessness or near homelessness would just fill out one form and then take that form, right, to all the organizations? Wouldn't that be awesome? No, yes. I see some nodding. Okay, cool. Yeah. So this group is addressing those issues on the ground. And so I invite you, if any of y'all have a passion for housing, to reach out to us, and we'd love to get you on that in that sector. Next is our mental and behavioral health. So many folks working on this, specifically shout out to Roseanne Vasquez, the local behavioral health collaborative, all of you that participate in the local behavioral health collaborative. It's a collective impact model right here in our community, doing some amazing work, assessing, planning, moving into action. And with that, here's some alarming data. 35% of residents reported needing mental health services. And that's of 1,000 plus, a little less than 1,100 participants participated in this survey. So they're working towards lots of transformation. I'd also invite you to participate in mental and behavioral health with resilience leaders. And lastly, our food assistance services. Not lastly, one more slide, sorry. Food assistance services. 53% of our residents reported needing food assistance services. 53%. And I've often have thought, like, why do we have food insecurity in this community? We're an agriculturally rich community full of farms and great organizations working on this. Why are we 50% of our community food insecure? And with COVID, it must be even more alarming, right? So this food sector is doing some really cool things related to additional surveying, specific at New Mexico State University, sort of building on the survey that we had and asking some additional questions that could really assist folks at the university level and the team there in terms of how do we address food insecurity in our students, right? Our students are supposed to be going to college, right? And learning and building a life and then going out and seeking career. And then lastly, our youth mentoring and community schools. Again, this is just a snippet. We have these 10 survival and thriving services, all sorts of data. But this one has always been something that we ponder quite a bit is in our youth mentoring and community in the schools. When we see 3 in 10 residents reported their children needing health services at school. 1 in 4 residents reported their children needing mental health services at schools. We're doing so much with the community in the schools. They're here today. We have so many health programs in our schools, and yet there are kids that are in need of these services. And what we also found is a huge discrepancy between what parents say their kids need and what kids are actually saying they need. So we're digging into that and trying to understand what does that look like and why, right? So I invite you to the table. If you're interested in participating, please jot down this website. It's dacrl.org. It's adonianaresilience.leaders.org to see and sort of, in one place, our website, all the events and information, our strategic plan and things that we've been working on. And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with a quote. This is one of my favorites. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And I'll adapt that, good women as well, to do nothing. I challenge you. We have a lot of adaptive work to do in our community. I'm here to listen, to consult. You always have a friend at City Council. There are so many of us on council. In fact, all of the council, good city council that care about people in marginalized communities, care about reducing poverty, and building up our community. And with that, here is my contact information. I thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your patience as I move through this work.